Hi guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I'm here to do a recent reads wrap up. So I don't think I've done a wrap up since around the end of August, so a lot of these are the books I've read so far in September. The first book I finished since the last time I talked to you was the last book I was reading for the Scallywagathon, which was Revenger by Alistair Reynolds. The best way I can describe this book is literally kind of like pirates in space that turns into a bit of a revenge story, and this one was a lot of fun and one that I wasn't really sure of going into. I didn't really know exactly what the story was about, so it definitely took me by surprise so many times. I really enjoyed my reading experience of it. So this follows two sisters, Adrana and Arafura, and we basically follow them as their father has kind of gotten into a tricky money situation. I think he's been dealing with the wrong type of people. He's lost a bit of money and they are starting to struggle. The two sisters are kind of, particularly the older sister Adrana, is really itching for a bit of adventure, and they end up running away from their home and running away from their nanny, who is a robot, and they sign up to be these particular type of crew members on this ship with this particular captain called Captain Rackamore. And what these ships do, using these old alien bones that they found years and years and years ago, they're able to go to these other type of planets that are closed off. There's lots of different crew members who do loads of different things to kind of figure out when these kind of planets will open and how long they can be in these planets before they're closed up again for however long, and they can basically go down and scavenge for treasure and sell them on and become rich. So it's a little bit like piracy. I wasn't sure where this story was going, and it took me a while to kind of really figure, like, to really feel at home in the story and to feel comfortable with what was going on and understand the world, because it's a very like deeply entrenched sci-fi world. There's no mention of Earth. It's like this is where humans have been, like, in different planets and different galaxies for millennium. It's, you know, Earth is a very, 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 very long time ago. There's no mentions of it. But then about 100 to 150 pages in, something happened that was just so shocking for me. I was not expecting it, and it completely turned the story upside down for me and got me really, really invested and really, really excited about it. We're mainly following Arafura, who kind of ends up going by Fura in the middle of this book, and I will say that she kind of starts off a bit like almost like a Primrose like character from the Hunger Games, and she's like this little sister who's a little bit innocent of the world and always has her older sister kind of looking out after her. And then halfway through the book she kind of starts becoming a bit stronger and a lot more independent, and I will say she actually became a little bit unlikable for me. She became very cocky, and, you know, with very, very little experience, she suddenly thought that she was the boss of everything and she should dictate what everyone else does, and that did get a little bit annoying for me. But I still did really enjoy where this went, and I definitely will be reading the rest of the trilogy because this was just a lot of fun. As I said, pirates in space, and I don't think you can go wrong with that. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was After the Silence by Louise O'Neill, which I won't talk about because I have a full video review on this book, which I will link above. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars, really enjoyed it, recommend people pick it up. Then I read Karen Slaughter's Kiss Cut, which is the second book in the Grant County series. I read the first book earlier on this year. In this series we kind of basically follow two main characters. We were following a paediatrician slash the county coroner, Sarah, as well as the Grant County police chief, Jeffrey Tolliver, and the two of them are in a relationship. They were previously married, now they're divorced, and they're kind of in a are they, aren't they kind of relationship now. And the first book we followed a kind of a serial killer who's going after women, and in this book we start following this case that has to do with children after this young girl who's only around 13 years of age, she seems like she's going to shoot this other teenager. Of that standoff does turn deadly at the end, and it ends up opening up this case that leads to a lot of secrets within Grant County, as well as investigation into a massive ring of basically child abuse and paedophilia and a lot of scandal. And I've read like dark books in the past. I'm not really shy of reading really tough topics, but this book in particular was probably one of the darkest graphic books I've read in a really, really long time. It was quite hard to read at times, I have to say. This is obviously massive trigger warnings for, I think, just Karen Slaughter's books in general have like trigger warnings for pretty much everything, but this has trigger warnings for child sexual assault, paedophilia, child pornography, female genital mutilation, the mutilation of a fetus. What else? In this book as well we are following a character who's dealing with PTSD due to things that happen in the first book, which is a lot of it sexual assault and rape and torture. So we are kind of seeing a little bit of that as well. So there's just so much going on in this book, and it was just so dark. It was just so dark, and it's one of these books that like there's not really it's not really completely tied in a bow because everything is just so disgusting in it and so dark. There were some really odd bits in this book, I will say, about because we're also following like Sarah and Jeffrey's relationship, and there are these kind of weird bits where like you're kind of like they're investigating this like child pedophilia, child pornography case, and then it would switch back to like them dealing with their own sexual relationship and trying to move that forward. And I found just like the juxtaposition between those two really weird, and I'm kind of like, I don't really want to think about anyone having sex right now if we're also looking at like this child pornography thing. And it just made me feel icky. Like, there's the character in this, Lena, as well, who is dealing with things from the first book. She became a very unlikable character in this, which is very hard to say because she's going through something really, really, really traumatic, and I just felt like the author didn't really do justice to her character, and I just really didn't like anything her character did in this book. I felt disappointed at how she was reacting to things that had happened to her and how she was dealing with them, and it wasn't done in a particularly healthy way at all. I do enjoy the series. This one just definitely wasn't as good as the first one for me, and as I said, it was very dark and quite difficult to read at times, so I gave it like a 3 to a 3.5 stars. This book I read was my first book from my Instagram Picks My September TBR challenge. That was The Last Namsara by Kirsten Cicerelli. This is a fantasy book, a YA fantasy book, and we are following a girl called Asha who is something called the Ascari in her town. Her father is also the king, but she is kind of this figure in this city that's very much feared because when she was a child she accidentally brought wrath and destruction in the form of dragons to the city, and now because of this she has like a personal vendetta against these dragons, and she has taken it upon herself to hunt down every last dragon in her world until there are no dragons left. Through a series of events she ends up going to try and find this dragon who is supposedly the first dragon to have ever existed. His name is Kozu, and he's like the most powerful dragon, and she believes that if she kills him she'll be able to kill the magic of dragons and the magic of old stories that kind of lives through dragons. She ends up developing this kind of frowned upon friendship with this slave who kind of starts helping her on her quest, and she discovers a lot more about her city's history, her own history, and the truth about the dragons and things that she never really thought about before. This one was okay for me. Like, I adore the cover of this book and I will probably keep it on my shelves because of that, but I wouldn't be rushing out to like buy the other books right then. I think I'll get them from the library if I do read the rest of the series, which is more kind of, they're more like spin-off books than an actual like trilogy. This one definitely, there just wasn't like, this is a book about dragons, about dragon hunting, and if I was to describe this book I would say it's like Gladiator mixed with How to Train Your Dragon plus a little bit of Dragonheart in it. It just felt like there just wasn't enough dragons in it. There was a little bit about dragons, but if you're going to give me dragons and if you're giving me people kind of bonding with dragons at any stage in a book, you need to give me like Eragon, Saphira style like bonding. Like I don't want like kind of wishy-washy dragon rider bonding. I need it like full force. I need them to talk like in each other's minds. I need them to be like the loves of each other's lives, you know. Like I need it to be that. I need it to be like that kind of bond, not this kind of wishy-washy bond that was in this. I also do genuinely find it really hard to read books where dragons are being hunted and killed, because dragons are just such magnificent creatures, and there's a reason why we love to read about them. They are just so magical and so fearsome, and to think about them existing in any kind of world is just, there's just something so fabulous about them. And any time I read about them being killed in books, I genuinely just feel really, really sad, and I find it really hard to read about. So I definitely, at the start of this book where she was killing a lot of dragons, I found it very hard to read, and I just didn't really like that. In a kingdom where there are slaves and the slaves are treated really, really badly, and she has this relationship with this slave called Torwin, and it was very insta-lovey, I'll say that for certain, like literally super insta-lovey. There's kind of an explanation given at the end for that, but I wasn't really mad about it either. And like I didn't see any reason for why he would like her so much. I could see why she would like him, but there was very little reason for him to be so obsessed with her when she treated him so badly. She didn't even say his name up until like 3/4 of the way into this book. She always called him the slave or like the skag or something, which is like a bad name for his type of people. So she like uses a lot of these like slurs against him, and is just not a particularly nice person towards him. Yeah, like it was fine, but I just needed more. Last book I read was A Land Divided by K.M. Ashman. This is historical fiction based around the Welsh kings, and we are following a few different Welsh kings who are all kind of fighting each other, so some of them don't end up in an alliance that leads to those kings basically being okay with England's rule. It's kind of complicated to explain because I don't really know that much about Welsh history. Around the time of like 1090, around that. This one was a very like simple book. It's literally just these kings fighting each other for the entire thing, and then a couple of female characters getting caught up with that because of who they're married to and who they're related to, and their lives being in danger because of that. It kind of, like, even though this is obviously historical, like, it seemed like so annoying that they were all fighting each other when they should be uniting together to fight the English. There's definitely an element of frustration as a reader there, seeing what they were doing to each other when they had a bigger enemy that they should be facing. It kind of felt like a massive, like, willy waving competition between all these men, basically. There was a bit at the start of this book where there was an attempt to rape a girl child. She was only around 8 years old, and this man tried to rape her, which was very disturbing to read. And then later on there is the rape of another character who is a woman, and that was hard to read as well. And so I will say content warnings for both of those. The only reason I would continue on with the series would be to follow Princess Nesta, who was one of the king in this book would be one of his daughters. I do think that she actually has a particularly interesting history of her own, and I would follow her more so than following the male characters in this book because I would like to see what she does. So I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And that is everything I have read so far in the last few weeks. Let me know what you guys have read down below if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts are, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye!